Okay, for this one, imagine that old-timey countdown thing with the clock hand kind of circle moving around as you hear the sounds of like a projector, and it counts down 5, 4, 3, 2, except then it never gets to 1. It just beeps, and then the movie starts. That's the introduction I wanted to do for this, but this is a podcast, so instead I'm just going to say this is vaguely scientific. Winter is coming. I am here already. I am Derek. On this island, survival is not a game, and neither is Jim, the scientist. Hi, Jim.
It's the professor and Marianne.
Here on Gilligan's Isle. And
Yeah.
Kids, on episode 161 of Vaguely Scientific, our guest was Big A. Hi, Big A.
Hi.
Hey, everybody.
Those were all references to TV shows that had disappointing endings.
Wait, what's the one that I was?
Lost.
Oh, okay. I don't know why I thought it was a reference to the Hunger Games, because I've never seen either of those things.
I never watched Lost, so I had to look up. I just know a lot of people hated the ending of it.
I feel like the ending of Lost was definitely terrible, but that being said, I think the first 5 seasons are still that good enough that it's worth watching.
Mm-hmm.
Worth watching. But do you not feel like if you... Because so I've never watched Lost. Do you think that if I just didn't watch the ending, would I feel like unsatisfied?
Does the ending make enough sense?
You personally, or any like a person?
Well, someone who hasn't seen the ending, I guess.
If you're comfortable doing that, then yes. I feel like there are points you could cut it off.
I don't know if I can commit to something like that.
Yeah, it would take great willpower.
All right, now what's the one that was the reference for Big A? Because I don't know that one either.
How I Met Your Mother.
Oh. I've never seen that, but I know that everyone universally hates it, so.
The ending, it's phoned in. It's out. I should stop talking about it, I guess. But
this is good. I'm learning a lot.
You're learning, yeah, I guess.
My brain went to a really dark and appropriate joke there, and I chose not to make it.
This is the show where listeners send in questions to hear our vaguely scientific answers, and who knows, we might even get some of those answers right. But first, it's time for Jim's fun science fact of the day. Jim?
Nice. This one was really interesting to me because I never really thought about it until today. And then I looked it up and I was like, oh, that actually makes perfect sense. And that is that gravity can bend the path of light, but it's not gravity that's pulling on the light itself, because photons don't actually have any mass. So gravity can't pull on light. So what's happening whenever something bends light, like something very, very heavy, is that gravity is distorting space itself. So it is literally bending the path that light takes, kind of like when you shine light through a glass of water. It's bending the light as it goes through the water, which I thought was super interesting because, we talk about gravitational lensing and like how big, heavy galaxies will bend light and things like that. It's like, oh, because it's heavy. It's like, no, it's actually bending space and then light passes through that, which I thought was so cool.
I feel like that's one of those concepts that makes it really hard to get into physics. Like, not get into it as in find interest in, but like really hard to kind of get your head around how that works.
Conceptualize, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I have to ask a stupid question.
Oh,
when
sure.
When you say bending
stupid.
Space, are you saying that it's like manipulating the matter that is in that field? Or
no, it's like whatever space-time is made out of, that's what it's bending.
Okay, that's what I thought you meant.
Yeah. It's such a weird concept because, like, it's one of those things that we don't really think about on a day-to-day level because it doesn't affect us even the slightest.
Yeah.
It only affects complex physics problems.
Yeah. It's not a thing that we, like, readily experience, but kind of do.
Yeah.
You gotta listen to other scientific podcasts for that information.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is only vaguely
It's only
scientific.
vaguely scientific,
Yeah.
Good night, everybody.
Yeah. Fingerprints?
Oh, because of the Animaniacs?
Yeah.
I almost forgot that. Speaking of forgetting things, I think we should move on to our first question this week, which is, what would be the benefits and drawbacks of having a perfect memory.
Perfect.
Perfect memory.
How perfect?
Well, there's a few different directions we can go with this, and I feel like the most appropriate, based on that question, is to talk about what constitutes memory when we're talking about it, because we could compare our human ability to remember things to the memory of a computer, which are different things.
Okay.
Sure.
Like if somebody says perfect memory, I'm thinking like perfect recall, like you can put data together exactly as it was originally laid out or whatever. And that's what a computer can do. Like a computer reads data that is recorded, and that data is not recreated. But like when humans remember things, we're not pulling from some hard written disk of data. We're like actually recreating the events in our mind. So that's why that's why eventually you forget things, because there isn't like a hard disk or whatever.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently every time you recall something, it's not 100% perfect.
Yeah, I read about, I don't know if it's true and I don't remember the numbers, but I read that it was theorized that every time you remember a specific event, it gets altered slightly.
I've heard that, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I kind of, the direction you were going in, one aspect I was thinking of was the type of memory. Like, obviously, you're talking about, like, technical, factual.
Sure.
I remember what I had for breakfast, exactly 1 year ago today. The other avenue I was thinking of was, like, in terms of, like, emotional memory.
Ooh.
I don't know if would fall into that same category, but, like, being able to remember how you felt during, like, different scenarios, like, whether they are, like, positive or negative.
That is a really interesting point, because if I remember like an event or something that happened when I was like 10 or like when I was really young and didn't have emotional intelligence to like comprehend certain things, like now as an adult, I still kind of view that event from the perspective of an adult as if that's how it happened.
Right.
I don't know if that's a universal thing or if it's just me.
I mean, I think that makes sense. Like, I mean, in a lot of ways, it's like looking back and being like, why was I like that?
Why was I? Yeah, I shouldn't have done that. I remember thinking that was dumb because logically this, as if as a 10-year-old, I had like all this knowledge.
Which actually does bring me to one of the things I think would be super bad about that is just the idea that I mean, I don't know if everyone else does this. I know that a lot of people do this, so I don't know if this is a shared experience that the three of us all have. But sometimes you might just think of something very stupid you did when you were younger. And you'll be like, oh man, I wish that hadn't happened. And having perfect memory means that every single time you did something stupid, you would remember it someday and like have that same exact, knee jerk, like, oh, what a terrible person.
I mean, I think of stupid stuff I did yesterday and hyperfixate on it. So
yeah, but I mean, I'm talking about like 15 years ago.
Sure.
Yeah, I feel like that would be a real balance. I mean, you could also like recall with perfect clarity, like the first time you rode like your favorite roller coaster, and maybe like that would, give you like joy each day.
Yeah.
So like it would be a matter of like where you spend your like time and your thoughts.
But what if the first time you rode a roller coaster, you cried for the entire 2-minute experience? And then you got to remember that all the time.
So you're both kind of touching on a thing that like I can remember some things to a certain degree, and that doesn't mean that I'm like continually experiencing them. Like how close to currently experiencing this would be a perfect memory?
That is true, yeah, because I guess even if you have a favorite movie and you watch it 10 times, like there are diminishing returns. So yeah, I guess that's a good point.
Actually, that was another thing I had thought about, is the idea that anytime you experience something like on a repeat viewing, or reading something again that you haven't read in a long time. It's like, oh, I remember exactly. Not that it would necessarily take away all of your enjoyment of it, but sometimes it's kind of like I'll watch a movie or I'll reread a book that I sort of like 2/3 remember. And as I'm going through, it's like, oh yeah, that happened. That's so cool, or something like that.
Like that's why you can watch a movie multiple times or read a book or whatever. You can do these things multiple times and still find things that, like, is it always that you didn't catch them? This kind of translates kind of well into another thing that I wrote down. So like the idea being, if you watched the movie, if you physically sat there and your eyes were taking in the input and your ears were taking in the input from the movie, in theory, you caught everything. You just didn't notice it or something.
Yeah.
And I did a little bit of research about the concept of an eidetic memory.
Okay.
Which has been described many ways, and the spoiler here is that scientifically speaking, there is no conclusive evidence that an eidetic memory actually is a thing. Which a lot of people say it's in the same realm as claims of like psychic ability, in the sense that like you technically can't prove that it doesn't exist, but we're pretty sure that it doesn't exist. But the idea being that you could like open a book and look at a page for like 3 seconds and then close the book and then like call the visual image into your mind so perfectly that you could then read it.
Oh, yeah.
I did a little bit more research into this because I thought this was interesting, that most claims of eidetic memory actually appear in children age 6 to 12. They lose that ability after they grow up. So we don't have any examples of adults with this ability, which actually does kind of make sense because children are better at learning things than adults. So I do think they have better memories than adults.
You know, it's really weird. This is a tangent, but I think it's kind of fascinating. When I think of myself as a child, I can't visualize myself being short, even though, like, in my brain, I'm like, but I had to have been this small. Instead of me thinking of myself as being short, I always think, oh, everything around me was just really big. And that's not how it worked at all. But it's so, and I remember being carried all the time. Not all the time, but I remember like when I would get picked up and carried and stuff when I was like a toddler. And it's like, I don't remember being smaller than my parents. It's so strange.
It's so funny. I just had that exact same thought like 3 days ago. So obviously we're both little ones, and I just saw my daughter lying there, and I was like, I just can't imagine being so small that you like fit onto another person.
Yeah, I think that's why I thought of it too.
If it helps at all, Jim, I also don't remember you ever being short. Because you've always been taller than me.
Well, that's fair, yeah. But like, I remember being carried, but I also can't visualize like the size discrepancy that had to have existed.
Right. Yeah, I never really thought about that. But you're right, because your perspective is that you didn't grow. Things aren't big anymore.
Yeah. Although that does actually make me think of something else that I think would be kind of neat for the ability to remember stuff. And that is to be able to remember the geometry of certain things, like buildings. Like I have lived in, well, growing up, I lived in 3 different houses, and I remember them all pretty well. But like, I don't know, I think it'd be neat to be able to be like, oh yeah, in this house, the couch was here and over there. I don't know. I think about that kind of stuff sometimes, and I'm like, man, where were these certain pieces of furniture? I just don't remember anymore.
I mean, for me, I spent a decent amount of time thinking of like trying to come up what specifically would be the drawbacks, because I feel like the benefits are more obvious and kind of like, you know, you would never forget where you left things, or you would remember birthdays or something like that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, while I think the drawbacks are more subtle and less obvious, I kind of maybe think that they're worse. Like they're worse that the benefits don't make up for it.
Yeah.
And like, so one thing that I was thinking of, I have always, and I've said this on the podcast before, that I've found that I tend to remember details about things that a lot of people I talk to will forget a lot.
Mhm.
And I find that I keep reminding people, or I'm like, this information comes up all the time. I don't understand how other people keep forgetting it.
Oh, yeah.
Or something like that. I'm being very vague on purpose here, but like the idea,
We all know who you're talking about.
we all know who you're talking about. Justin, I don't know. Okay. But anyway, so a drawback for me, and this is if you are the only person who has a perfect memory, you might remember every single detail about a certain thing and like put it in context of like a crime, if you're like a witness to a crime or something. Just because you remember all of that stuff doesn't mean people are going to believe you.
Right.
So like, I feel like that would just be frustrating.
Yeah, you'd get Cassandra'd all over the place.
Yeah.
Everywhere you go, you'd be like, hey, I remember that time that the pipe burst in this room. And it's like, you've never even been in this place before.
No, I actually had the exact same thought, although in a different context.
Okay.
Just in terms of like personal relationships too. Like, how often is it the case where someone says, I told you this, and you're like, no, you didn't. And then
Yeah.
there's kind of an impasse there. I feel like having that perfect memory would be beneficial in a sense. I feel like also it could possibly make you less humble than you should be as well.
Oh, sure.
So
I've had plenty of conversations where it's like, you said this, and or like I might be arguing with somebody and people will be like, well, you said this, and in my head I'll be like, I couldn't possibly have said that because I don't think that, but like that doesn't mean I didn't misspeak or something.
Right.
Just remembering, like, just because you remember how you actually said it doesn't mean they remember how you said it.
Right.
Or if you're telling them you said this and they say like, no, I didn't.
Right.
And you're like, even if you're like 99% sure, there's also value in saying, well, I guess we just don't know.
Yeah.
I'll just let it go.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I may not have said that. Let's start here.
Yeah.
Let's start where we are now. Because
but then you'd get frustrated with yourself because you'd be like, but I know exactly what I said. I remembered it.
Fair.
And no one will ever believe you.
Yeah. And I feel like that's a huge drawback, because you would get hung up on things like that. Not even in arguments, but just like details about just everyday life. Like, you would know exactly what you did. I don't know. It seems like that would be more stressful than I think we typically might think about.
Yeah.
I think one thing, I don't know if I'm like stretching this a little here, but to take it back into the realm of positives, I wonder if that could possibly give you really elite like cooking skills. Like if you can if you can just remember like what combination of things produce this like amazing flavor, you can just like throw it together.
Yeah.
Oh, I know it's like this, and this, and then just to kind of like know what you're going to produce without even.
You can watch your grandmother make the sauce, and then you'll know how to make the sauce, because they don't write it down. The grandparents don't. They just throw things in a pot, and they never write it down.
Anything like academic or based on intellect, you wouldn't have to practice.
You wouldn't have to study for tests.
You wouldn't have to study for tests. You wouldn't have to like read sheet music if you're a musician. Now you'd still have to develop like muscle memory and physical.
Although, I mean,
ability.
with like test studying, I mean, there's something to be said for the idea. Like, you can rote memorize as much as you want, but there's also the practice of like solving certain problems.
Right.
Like in math, you can memorize formulas, but I mean, that won't help you if you can't put that into practice somehow. Like physics is the same way.
Which is the reason they teach math wrong in school.
Yeah. I've noticed in college, they just give you the formulas and they say, all right, you apply them now. So you're allowed to have those on the test. In high school, they're like, you'll never have a calculator when you go. And it's like, no, you will.
Yeah. That, not to get on another tangent about that, but that's a rant that I have all the time, which is like, a good math teacher teaching kids in early high school and elementary school, they shouldn't say you will never have a calculator. They should just say it's important to know what the calculator is doing.
Yeah. I know this is getting more tangenty, but I find myself becoming more of a Luddite as the years go by.
I mean, I certainly feel that way about video games, because it seems like nowadays anyone can just be like, surprise, we don't offer this game anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or like movies and stuff.
I want to go back before we move on, or before we tangent further. I want to go back to what made me think of this was Big A saying being able to cook and just being able to grab ingredients and throw them together. I want to see how far we can stretch this, because we talked about the idea of like computers being able to perfectly recall data, but then you brought up remembering emotions and remembering specific things about, like, not just facts, but experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to know if perfect memory would kind of be like recalling a save state in your life, where at any point you can just put yourself in that exact moment and feel like, and then in that case you'd be able to like rescan your environment and stuff. But the reason that I thought about this is, what if you didn't have to measure, for example, flour or sugar or whatever, because you could perfectly remember how the weight of it felt in your hand?
Interesting.
Something like that.
Man, that's like Sherlock from Sherlock superpowers.
Right? Well, it made me think of there's an episode of Penn and Teller's Fool Us where a guy, it's been a long time since I watched this, so I'm recalling it now. It may not be accurate. But the idea is he holds a deck of cards and lets the cards drop from his hand in like a cascade.
Mm-hmm.
And he asks somebody to name a card, and as this cascade is going, he reaches out with his other hand and grabs that card.
Oh, okay.
And the way that he actually did it, because he was trying to fool Penn and Teller, was he practiced so much that he could feel, like he could find the card in the deck and then he could feel where it would be when it drops out of his hand. So it wasn't even a magic trick. It was like he's
just like literally a dexterity.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And so you could like do stuff like that.
That's crazy.
Which is a weird, and Jim's right, it's a weird Sherlock superpower.
Yeah.
If you were like a race car driver, if you could like study, the various turns and like bumps in the road and things like that, if you could just like hammer out the fastest, just break records every time you're out on a new race.
I mean, I've heard this story repeated many, many times, and I think it's sort of up in the air whether it's like I mean, it's not apocryphal, but it's also sort of like whether or not it's like a true statement, whether or not. So let me just tell you the story. And
okay.
So there was a race car driver. His name is Ayrton Senna, one of the best of all time. Like he was tremendous at setting fast laps, and he was tremendous at winning races. And there was this incident where he was lapping around Monaco, and he like clipped the side of a wall and crashed, and that ended his race. And he said, the wall moved. And everyone's like, well, the wall can't move. It's a wall. And like after the race, they went out there and they measured it. And somehow it had been knocked, like, I think it was like a quarter of an inch off of where it should have been. Not by his crash, but by something that had happened earlier on. And allegedly the thought is that he was lapping so perfectly every single time that quarter of an inch actually messed him up and caused him to crash. Now, again, that's sort of like, did that actually happen, or did he just say that? But
right.
But based on his abilities and his racing style, I mean, it wouldn't shock me if that was true, to be honest with you.
I mean, even that as like an analogy, like I could see how that could happen in another scenario, like just the details of your surroundings threw you off.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I could believe that. I don't know. It's a neat story.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot of instances where the race car drivers are just like, they know where they are and they almost sort of like tune it out, and they're just like, because it's just repeat after repeat.
So at a certain point, you can just become Daredevil.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah, you remember it so well you can do it with your eyes closed.
yes.
Hopefully all of the race car drivers and the racing fans come back after tuning out Jim telling that story.
I know you're listening, Lewis Hamilton. Send me an email.
Come on the show.
Yeah, that too.
Anytime a celebrity is mentioned, come on the show. I'm hung up on the definition of perfect memory now that we brought, and I didn't think about that until I actually read the question out loud starting this recording, and now I feel like there's just too many places to go.
Oh, I did want to mention, like, if you had some kind of very bad experience, like some kind of trauma, like a car accident or abuse or something like that, that's not something you necessarily want to remember in perfect, gritty detail.
Yeah, I thought about that. One of the things that your brain does as a defense mechanism in certain scenarios is to actually repress things. But we've also kind of determined that that's usually not super healthy. So I wonder how that would affect people.
Yeah, it's a weird thought because there's not a way to test that, or like there's not a sample that you can do to do an experiment on that sort of concept.
Right. There's too much sensory input to record.
Mm-hmm. And nobody has like a perfect memory that you could ask them.
Right. I wonder how much hard drive space it would take to create a save state snapshot of what you are currently experiencing right now.
Ooh, interesting.
That, like, probably a lot, because there's a lot of stuff happening in my brain right now.
Yeah. It's weird because, like, sensory input is such a different type of, like, I don't want to call it programming language, but kind of. It doesn't translate one-to-one to a computer super duper well, although we're getting closer.
I feel like the visual, the audio, those are like easily representable. I don't know. We still don't have like smell-o-vision, so I'm not quite sure how you would do that. But
yeah.
Nickelodeon lied to me. Or Cartoon Network. I don't know who did smell-o-vision.
I think somebody invented like the concept of smell-o-vision, but it was very rudimentary, and you would have to like constantly buy refill cartridges for the smells. But I seem to recall it was kind of like you got a certain number of different basically scent packets, and it would like mix them together and release them in like certain quantities that would like approximate a smell. But again, you'd have to like keep buying these over and over and over again.
And if you want to smell in just black and white, you still have to buy the color sense. And it'll just let you smell in black and white.
Yeah, we're not there yet as a technologically.
And if one of the scent things goes, then it tells you can't even watch TV anymore.
Oh.
Now you've just made me mad. Well, before I forget, and before we move on to our second question, I'd like to tell you about one of my favorite animals. And it's autumn now, which means a lot of people are dealing with the rodents in their areas trying to make nests inside houses to stay out of the cold. So this week, I'd like to talk about rats. We colloquially identify rats as rodents that look like mice but are bigger. And rats are a member of the superfamily Muroids, which does include mice, but also things like lemmings, gerbils, and hamsters. And there are a lot of rodents that have the word rat in their name, such as bandicoot rats and kangaroo rats, but the ones I'm talking about are the genus Rattus, or Ratus, probably Rattus. And these are your black rats and your brown rats, also known as common rats, or sewer rats, or wharf rats, or street rats, but I don't buy that, so because rats are wonderful. Contrary to popular belief, rats make incredibly good pets, provided they didn't grow up in the wild. Rats are very affectionate and social animals, and while people tend to think that they are dirty and gross, rats actually prefer to keep themselves clean. They groom themselves pretty regularly, almost like cats, and they pose no more risk of zoonotic diseases than cats and dogs. A domestic rat will cuddle up on your lap, take a ride on your shoulder, and give you tiny hugs. Though they do get lonely, so it's a good idea to have more than one. And if you're actually interested, you can find more information about how to keep rats pretty easily because they are low-key awesome pets. Many people associate rats with the Black Death, of course, but that plague is typically believed to have been caused by Yersinia pestis, a bacteria carried by fleas that preyed on rats due to the unsanitary conditions in which they lived. And rats prefer not to carry fleas, or so I would assume. Rats have been shown to be fairly intelligent, with the capacity to learn and be trained, and they have actually been used to sniff gunpowder residue in crime scenes and sweep for mines, and provide companionship for animal-assisted therapy. And rats can even diagnose tuberculosis through smell.
Huh.
So most urban areas do suffer rat infestations, and this is primarily due to how quickly they reproduce. And they can carry diseases in the wild, so you shouldn't just go out and try to make friends with rats in the middle of some dark alley, but that's true about cats and dogs and people, too.
Yeah, but where am I going to buy my fake Rolexes if I don't do that?
I don't know. I mean, usually rats are more into trafficking cheese.
3-card Monte Carlo.
I was talking about the people in the dark alley.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, you do you, Jim. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life. Well, without further ado, I think we should move on to our second question, which is, what appliances could we replace with Stone Age animals a la the Flintstones? Conversely, what appliances should we not replace with Stone Age animals a la the Flintstones? I want to say a disclaimer before we dive into this one that there are ethics probably, and we're going to ignore all of them.
Oh, okay, good.
Okay.
I mean,
position normal.
Yeah. So actually the first one I wanted to bring up is not really an ethical quandary because it's something that happens in the modern world, and that is that animals can be used to wake you up a la an alarm clock.
Oh, like a rooster.
Yeah. Well, in the show, they always have like a little bird, and Fred always smacks the bird on the head to shut it off, which is not ethically sound. You shouldn't smack an animal on the head. But like in the real world, if you have a pet dog or a pet cat, they'll frequently wake you up at the same time every day because they want to get fed. Or like
That's
said,
fair.
a rooster or something will probably crow at a certain time. So yeah, I want to jump in right there because any kind of animal that can wake you up at a certain time, I think that fits in with animals that we could replace some technology with.
Okay. On that vein, I have two actual answers, and these are not Stone Age animals. But it's the same kind of like, this is a legitimate answer to the question. A lot of people who keep fish tanks have filter feeders in there to help clean the tanks.
Oh, yeah.
And then the other one that I came up with is there are actually services that you can hire of people who own goats that will come and graze on your lawn, and they'll eat weeds and like poison ivy and stuff. So that's like instead of a lawnmower.
Yeah. I was actually thinking about the goat one because, what is it in the Flintstones? It's some kind of, is it a goat? I'm going to Google this because I didn't think to like look up what the Flintstones actually use.
I was going to say, I'd be curious to know, like, do you pay them to bring the goats, or do they?
Oh, it's some kind of
do they
like
pay
small
you?
dinosaur.
I feel like it's like a tit for tat. Like they're kind of getting their feed for free.
I feel like I made that argument when I heard about this. But yeah, it's people who own goats, and they will like transport them, and they'll just like let them graze on your property for certain amount of time, and you hire them to do that.
I would love for goats to come and eat all the grass on my front hill because I don't like cutting it. I think I'm going to have to cut it one more time before the end of the year at least, depending on whether or not we have a second summer, which happens from time to time around here.
Yeah. You should just salt the earth so nothing will ever grow there again.
That's a lot of salt. That's expensive.
I'm sure it wouldn't be like, it's probably not that actually efficient, but it could be very refreshing if you could like train an elephant to like suck a bunch of water up its trunk and then just kind of like dump it all over you as you're showering.
Yeah.
I wrote that down as in between my actual answers and my goof answers. Because I didn't know where to put it.
I was thinking about that because it's not an altogether bad idea, except for the fact that that's just the elephant's nose, and you're going to get elephant boogers on you instead of like cleaning yourself.
That's where I was going to go, is like how much of that water is just full of mucus now.
Yeah. That being said, elephant lawn sprinkler.
Ooh. Yeah.
That'll get the neighborhood talking. Did you ever hear, this is a little off topic, but it made me think of that. It's I've heard this hypothetical that's kicked around. It's like, what do you do with an elephant if you are given the elephant and you're not allowed to get rid of it? Lawn sprinkler.
Lawn sprinkler's a good one. I just have a pet elephant then.
Yeah.
That sounded like the setup to like a joke book you would read when you were like 7.
If I'm remembering correctly, apparently it was like on some random job interview thing you had to fill out, and they were like, "What is this? What's the answer to this?" So
those like weird, they want to see how you problem solve kind of things.
What's your lateral thinking capabilities?
Yeah,
that's the entire premise of this show.
That just reminded me of how do you get an elephant in the refrigerator? You open the door, you put it in there, you close the door. How do you get a giraffe in the refrigerator? You open the door, you take the elephant out, and you put the giraffe in. It's a series of jokes.
Yeah, there's not going to be enough room in there if you leave the elephant in.
Yeah.
Speaking of elephants, one thing, and this is actually the exact same reason that I didn't agree with the shower one, dishwasher. I don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah. Oh, on dishwasher, I wrote, like, a lot of people, I know this is not hygienic and there's a step that follows it, but like a lot of people will put their dirty dinner plates on the floor for their pets to clean, like a dog.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, that's kind of like a dishwasher. And then I was like, but gross.
I don't know how easy it would be either, but I feel like surely there's some use going back to carrier pigeons, even for the sake of like emergencies. Like, I don't know. I could see like passing messages from like one municipality to another, like, here, shoot this message off. Like, we need this, we don't need that.
Yeah. That would be kind of a neat idea, because I know that there are some areas where like they're so isolated that they don't really get internet of any sort. And I think that in recent times they've been like attaching flash drives to carrier pigeons just to like send information, like files like you can use on a computer, but you can't connect to a network, which I think is kind of a neat idea.
That is really cool.
I was wondering, are carrier pigeons, is that like a hobby like ham radio is?
I wonder.
Like, are there people is there a community of carrier pigeon people?
If not, there should be.
There should be. That'd be fun. I don't know how to train carrier pigeons.
Yeah, I feel like you have to put in a lot of the legwork there before the emergency comes, and then you need them. So
you gotta prepare for the emergency. I guess I don't think I mentioned this on air, but I kind of forgot that I was supposed to be looking at Stone Age animals, so I just have animals. Having said that, another one of my goof answers is they could use electric eels as a sous vide. Put them in the little tub with the food that you're cooking. That's something.
I'm too uncultured. I don't know what that is.
Sous vide is like you put meat in water and then you like put this heating element in the water and it like cooks the meats like slowly.
Okay, I've heard of that. I guess I didn't know the term.
Yeah, that's what it is essentially.
You don't have to leave that in the episode.
I mean, a lot of people may not know what it is either.
That's fair. I mean, I'm not gonna be the one to educate them because I don't really know how it works.
I only know of it because of Adventure Time.
Ah, okay. Well, that works.
Yeah, I guess so.
So I have two more to just like put on there. I went through a lot of animals that I thought might make a good garbage disposal. And the two that I kind of settled on, because I figured pretty much throwing scraps of food to animals counts as sort of a garbage disposal. But the two that I wanted to actually settle on were a hippopotamus, because they could just like, I don't know, just eat lots of big things.
Mm.
But then the one that I thought was better than hippopotamus was piranhas. If you
Mm.
go with the cartoon version of piranhas.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
See, I was thinking earlier in terms of like the cartoon version of the goat,
Ah,
like the old thing where like I feel like there's like random Looney Tunes cartoons where there would just be a goat randomly going around eating everything that can possibly get in its mouth.
it would
Mhm.
eat like cans and stuff.
Yeah, or like a wrench.
Yeah, goats will eat anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. I that reminds me of the one that I thought was the absolutely most ridiculous thing that I had seen. And that was using a bird's beak as a pen. Cause like
Oh.
we already use bird feathers as pen. Why are we taking the whole bird and writing with its face?
I didn't know that was a thing, but I agree with you.
That's if you're really upper class. Like you.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
One thing I was thinking of was obviously there are still Amish around who use horses and donkeys and things like that for plowing the fields. If we're going like Stone Age, I'm trying to think of like what would be the best if you were Amish in the Stone Age and you wanted to use like some kind of
Ooh.
dinosaur for plowing your fields. Like,
Mm.
could you use like a Stegosaurus and just like, like plow like 30 feet wide, like all at
Ooh.
the same time?
Yeah.
I feel like you could do some industrial farming with dinosaurs.
They use like long neck dinosaurs as like cranes in the show.
Yeah.
I want to venture or posit or proffer or whatever word that I don't know what the Amish equivalent in the Flintstones would be, because like to oversimplify, the Amish in our current modern day, they don't use electricity or conveniences and stuff. Would they just not be allowed to use animals for anything? Like, I don't know what makes them Amish.
They're only allowed to use amoebas for their
They can only use single-celled organisms. Yeah, I didn't think to write that down, but you're right. They do use like long-necked dinosaurs as cranes and stuff. So using in modern day, using horses and stuff is kind of comparable to that, which is interesting because the Flintstones car is not a carriage. It's not drawn by an animal.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's Fred's feet.
Yeah. That's weird when you think about it, because
Why
like, they
don't
use
they
animals for everything.
Right. Why would they not use them for a car?
Yeah.
I was looking at a television.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure, I haven't watched the Flintstones in so long, but I'm pretty sure they have TV in the Flintstones.
Yeah, they do.
So that's not a thing, but I did want to draw some inspiration from Terry Pratchett's Discworld, because it's been a while since I shoehorned that into one of these episodes, in which they have what is essentially a photo camera, which they call the iconograph. And the way that it works in the Discworld is that a tiny imp sits inside of this box, and when you push the button, it paints a picture really fast of what the lens can see. So it's just a little thing it's a little animal inside the box painting a picture, which I feel like you could use like some kind of telegraph function for. I mean, you could have animals recreate things with paint, but for like a television, you could use some kind of telegraph function or something and have like little actors, like tiny birds or something that are wearing costumes. And they receive what's supposed to be depicted on the television, and then they act it out.
Oh, like a little puppet show, but with like mice.
But with mice, yeah. So it's overcomplicated.
Yeah,
but, yeah.
The that actually made me think of the other thing that I did see, and I was like, I mean, that wouldn't work, so I didn't write it down. But I think there was an episode where like old timey TVs had the little antennas and they called them rabbit ears.
Yeah.
And I think there was an episode where there was just a rabbit sitting on top of the TV, but they adjusted its actual ears. Hey, it's a living.
I was gonna say, how long, if you had a small dog, if you left it alone with costumes, how many millions of years would it take before you have an episode of Wishbone?
Depends. Is it a Jack Russell Terrier? Then you're set. Well, that kind of makes me think of like mice and gerbils on like a hamster wheel, or a hamster on a hamster wheel. Turning like a power wheel, like, so that could be a thing. Another one that I thought of was sewing machines could be spiders.
Oh.
Because I wanted to throw that image out into the universe.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I can get behind that one.
Okay.
So another one that I thought was kind of interesting was the like they would always have a really long beaked bird that they would use as a hedge trimmer. And
yeah.
I don't think that would work like in the exact way that they do it in the show, where they take the bird's legs and like use them like a big pair of scissors. But I mean, there are probably a great number of animals that you could use to trim your hedges. Like we already mentioned the goats in the lawn. I'm sure there's something that you could get that would like topiary your hedges.
Beavers.
Ah, okay.
Oh.
They'll just take the hedges out and build a dam.
Well, they would cut through the thicker branches, and
Right.
and they could also be carpenters.
That's true. You could replace. Actually, what about using beavers to do forest clear cutting?
Oh, feel like they'd probably be okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, they could at least like prune your trees and things like that.
Yeah.
First thing I thought of when I read this question was just an episode of The Simpsons where Homer is trying to mix concrete in a pelican's bill. And he's like, now you say something quippy, like, it's a living, and then the pelican just falls over.
That's great. Actually, that does remind me of another one that I saw, which was the pelican mailbox. And that's just over-engineered. Like, you just need a box on a stick. You do not need a living creature.
It doesn't need to be an animal.
A living creature that will swallow your mail.
That's kind of you mentioned using the bird's beak to write. That's on the same level of the elephant shower. Is like, you could just, if you don't have plumbing, you could just find a waterfall. Like,
yeah,
over engineering.
True.
Like, you don't need to use the animals for this.
Right. I mean, if you look at, I know this isn't really Stone Age, but like the Romans built aqueducts and things like that. So I'm sure that a civilized society like the Flintstones world could have figured out aqueducts pretty easily.
I mean, they have bowling.
It does make me wonder, though, how comfortable would it be if you were, like, sleeping on top of a woolly mammoth? Like, especially if it was cold, like...
Oh.
I don't know. Don't knock it till you try it.
A heated mattress is woolly mammoth.
Not quite a waterbed, but, like, in that same vein.
Yeah. A big old flesh bed.
And then you have the soothing sounds of like the digestion happening inside.
I was thinking its heartbeat, but sure.
The stomach's gonna be the more like comfy place, though.
I mean, yeah, but its heart's got to be in the same zip code as that, right?
They're close. I mean,
yeah. One of the things I think is interesting about the Flintstones animals is that they all appear to be sentient and like thinking creatures.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, this is my job.
Hence it's a living quip.
Yeah. So, I mean, because maybe that's why the pelican lets you put mail in its beak. It's because it's being paid by the hour to hold the mail.
They're all a service, much like the goats.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like somebody rented that pelican to you.
Yeah.
Why does it? I'm hung up on that now, Jim. Why is it not just a box?
I don't know. Actually, that reminds me. There's also like they would use birds' feet as like stampers on official documents, and it's like, why don't you just make a stamper?
Because they just want to use the animals.
Yeah. They're over-engineering these animals to do things they shouldn't need to do, because you could just make a box or a stamper.
This was early man showing its dominance over nature. That's what it was.
Yeah, I mean, even after the bird has, like, passed and you, like, taxidermized it, like, it's, I feel like that would be, like, much less comfortable.
You don't need a living bird to be the record player.
It has to be alive.
Yeah. Because that's right, the record players were always the bird beak. It's like, you don't need a live bird for that.
Well, okay, so what I'm hearing, they used birds for a lot of things.
Yeah, they did.
Birds are just the multi-tool of the Flintstones.
Yeah, they're the easiest thing. No, they're not. They fly. I was going to say they're the easiest thing to catch, but no.
Well, that's why they have to pay them, I guess.
I will say those animals endured a lot of humiliation and just quipped about it. Like they didn't leave or like quit. They were just like, you know what? This is just another Tuesday for me.
They're definitely the blue collar animals for sure.
Yeah. I'm proud of them for that. Like they did a lot of things that I wouldn't want to do, like being a dishwasher.
Well, they're doing utility work, really, so probably they got some decent benefits.
That's true. Yeah. Probably a pretty good union.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's and then there's also like the one that popped into my head as soon as I said that for some reason was the pterodactyl that's an airplane, and it has to carry the large stone cockpit.
Oh, so they don't just ride on the back of it?
No, it's like got a big thing on its back that they all sit in. That's like the cabin and stuff.
So the intellectually developed pterodactyl, but they still drive it.
Yeah.
Like they can't just trust it to take them where they want to go.
I mean, there may not be like a captain. Like the pterodactyl may just have instructions and they're like, all right, we're going this way now. And the pterodactyl's like, all right, it's a living. And it just, because that's what they all say.
I'm starting to think that the Flintstones may not have been an accurate representation of history.
I mean, I don't know where you're getting that information. I saw it on TV.
I saw it happen. That's one of my favorite things to do when I'm watching a show or something where something ridiculous happens and somebody's like, that wouldn't happen. And I'm like, I just watched it happen. What are you talking about?
Oh, man.
I only have one that I could really think of that I absolutely think we shouldn't use animals for. I hesitate to say it, but it is a toilet.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's not a great one.
Yeah.
Although, what if it's just like there's a bowl and the pipe feeds into like a pig? The pig wouldn't care.
I was thinking maybe like dung beetles or something.
Yeah. They can make their little round balls.
Flies, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they clean it up and move it away.
Yeah.
Dang it. We made it work.
Not well.
No, I mean, better than I thought we were gonna.
Fair. Man.
What I learned is I should have looked up more information about the Flintstones because some of the references you made I didn't even know was a thing.
Yeah. Also, when I did that Google search for the lawnmower thing, I did see one other one that was probably not a great idea, which was Barney Rubble apparently has a lawnmower that's got a crab in the front, and it's just snip in the grass. Oh. But I don't think crabs can breathe on land. So maybe not that one. Maybe it's some kind of Stone Age crab that could.
Yeah. Or you could like hook it up so that it's in a bowl of water.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe you'll like store it in the bathtub or something.
Yeah.
You just take it out of the bathtub to mow the lawn and then you put it back. Listeners, let us know this week I don't know. I just think what animals would you like to replace your household appliances with? If you have any thoughts on that or anything else we talked about, I don't remember what the first question was.
We have show notes.
I know, but it was a joke because it was about memory.
Oh, right.
It took me a second, but I got it.
If you have any thoughts on that or anything else we talked about, you can email us at feedback@vaguelyscientific.com, and you can also comment on our blog, or you can like us on Facebook, and you can tweet at vaguelysci, or we're on YouTube.
Oh, yeah. You could comment on the YouTube.
You could comment on the YouTube channel. We got a few of those. That's always been fun.
That is cool, yeah.
It's still in audio form, so I didn't know how YouTube was going to do. Hey, Jim, where do we get all these wacky questions?
We get them from you, the listener. And if you, the listener, has a question that needs to be answered in a vaguely scientific manner, please email us at questions@vaguelyscientific.com. If you want to get our episodes the minute that they're released, you can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and all the other cool places that podcasts like to hang out. And subscribing and leaving feedback really helps us out, and so does telling your friends.
Telling your friends is still the best way to get the word out there, word of mouth. So please tell your friends.
Our vaguely musical intro is composed by Anthony Pizzelli. And don't forget to check out our merch store over at vaguelyscientific.threadless.com. There are maybe ethics, probably, and that's something you can get on all kinds of different merchandise, whether it's shirts or, wow, I'm blanking on the entirety of the store. shirts or shower curtains or skateboards, whatever tickles your fancy. And we're getting into the holiday season here, so you gotta get gifts for people.
We are good presents. I was going to say shirts at all.
Shirts at all, yeah.
I was gonna say, if they're telling their friends, should they tell their acquaintances or no?
Yeah.
I think they should tell everybody. I've told them to tell
Okay.
their enemies
Yeah,
before.
yeah. Especially, so listen, I shouldn't tell you this, but if you don't like the show, especially tell your enemies.
Yeah, because then they're going to suffer through us talking about inane nonsense for
Yeah.
approximately an hour every other week.
Yeah, that'll fix them.
That'll show them. Perfect revenge tactic. Anyway, thank you to Big A for being our guest this week.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And for Vaguely Scientific, I am Derek.
I'm Jim.
And I'm Big A.
And sayonara, Shadow the Hedgehog.
Toodaloo, everyone.
I forgot I put that in there. Dive right in here.
Let's
Okay.
do it.
Let's do it. Okay, I got my stopwatch up here.
Sonic the Hedgehog says, let's do it.
I almost
Let's eat a chili dog.
I almost typed in my as my little sign off phrase. I almost was gonna say sayonara, Shadow the Hedgehog, which is a very obscure reference, and I was like, I'm not gonna do
to
that.
what?
Well, it's the Sonic Adventure 2, the first appearance of Shadow the Hedgehog. It's like a big thing that the girl in his backstory says, sayonara, Shadow the Hedgehog.
Oh, does she? I don't remember that.
Yeah.
I forgot there was a girl in those
I
scenes.
haven't played Sonic Adventure 2 in like 15 years at least.
That's why I said it's a very obscure reference.
Someday you got to put it in there, though.
Man, I guess I'll just put it in here. I'm just gonna do it. Sayonara, Shadow the Hedgehog. I'm just putting it
It'll
in
be
here.
funny when this is the stinger, and it'll be like putting the cart before the horse. We had a whole conversation about it before we started recording.
I mean, that's all on you, Jim.
Yeah.